Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What I've got on the screen there is a photo of a Zimbabwean. Let's just have a closer look at it. This is an old man, not so old, but probably older because of his situation. He looks a lot older than he probably should be. He's wearing a ZANU-PF cap, and that's a dead giveaway. And right up at the bottom there is saying, write a story on what you see in the photograph. And don't forget chicken in. Well, what we see in the photograph is a very poor man. He's sitting outside his mud brick hovel. That's the only thing one can call it. That has got it's hardly 2 meters high, propped up with poles and roofed with plastic sheets. That says a lot. This is the 21st century, for Pete's sake. How can somebody call such a place home? It's tragic, but that is what it is. And millions of Zimbabweans today, maybe a slightly better structure, but nonetheless, a mud hut. No running water, no toilet facilities. They still continue to use the bush. And in the middle of the night, they just walk a few meters around the hut and do whatever they have to do. This is totally unacceptable. But I think what we also need to focus here is that this individual, well, whoever wrote that caption, wanted to emphasize the ZANU-PF connection, and the chicken in reference refers to what ZANU-PF was doing during the campaign last year. Supporters were bussed in to attend rallies, and they were given chicken in boxes with a piece of chicken and chips and maybe a soft drink. The reference has been that these people voted for ZANU-PF because they were given chicken in, pieces of chicken and chips. I think it's getting the wrong end of the stick. The truth of the matter is, and Mugabe Mnangagwa himself boasted about it, and we've all known about it, that ZANU-PF intimidates particularly the rural voters. That man didn't have much of a choice. I have grown up myself in the rural areas, and I can tell you that ZANU-PF's hold in the rural area is very strong. Mnangagwa himself was boasting last year during the campaign that ZANU-PF will have the ZANU-PF operatives be the party chief or some such individual in the front, the villagers in the middle, and the headman, who in most cases is nothing more than a ZANU-PF political commissar behind. And they will march the villagers to the polling station to vote. He boasted that ZANU-PF will know whom you voted for. And it is true. The party knows. This is why the party has increased so many polling stations. Up to the 2008 election, Zimbabwe had something like 10 polling stations in each constituency of about 30 to 40,000 people. And in those 10 polling stations, you could vote in any one of them. The party has since changed that. It has increased the number of polling stations from 10 for every constituency to over 50. And this time, you can only vote in one specific polling station. You are voting in the same constituency, but there's only one polling station where your name will appear. And ZANU-PF operatives will be sitting outside the polling station. They already know who is registered to vote at that polling station. They will know the people who are going in, or most of them at least. They will know who is ZANU-PF and who is not. And even those who pretend to be ZANU-PF and they vote for the opposition, when the results come, it will be very easy. For the sake of argument, if 300 people voted, and normally there is no more than 500 people in each polling station, if 300 people voted and the results comes, half of them voted for ZANU-PF, the other half voted for the opposition. The election agents will not have no more than an hour's job to assess who of the 150 would have voted for ZANU-PF. And the rest, they know they voted for the opposition. So one's vote is no longer a secret. That is the point. And if you know that, and you live in the rural area, where the regime is absolutely on grip on everything. For those who don't know, in the rural area, you do not own anything other than your cattle, your goats and chickens and so forth. The piece of land on which you build your hut, you don't own it. The headman can tell you to move and you will have to move. Indeed, many people have had their huts burnt down because they belong to the opposition. No compensation, nothing. The police rarely ever investigate such things. And so not doing what the party tells you is a serious situation, threat to you and your family in Zimbabwe. You don't have to stretch your imagination. If you were to go into his mud hut right now, what do you think you'd find? There's nothing there of any value. Look at the clothes he's wearing. Shoes. That's his most decent pair of shoes, decent pair of trousers. As for the food, I think it is fair to say that his meals are nothing to talk about. And this year in particular, when there's been a serious drought, I bet you there's not even a few kgs of maize in that mud hut. And so he has got to depend on the regime to sustain him. And we know that the regime has used food as a weapon in the rural areas. And so to blame him, I think, is to miss the point completely. He did not have much of a choice as to attend the ZANU-PF rallies and then to vote for ZANU-PF. The rural voter has no choice. The people who do have a choice are those in the urban centers, where the party's grip on them is not as tight. But admittedly, it's growing there as well. So to blame him is completely to miss the point. One has got to say, what kind of citizen would that make? Somebody who lives in such a hut in this day and age. And I said to myself, to be quite honest, it was nothing more than accident of birth. That I am not the one sitting outside the mud oval today. Could have easily been me. Indeed, I have many relatives who live in the rural areas, and their living condition is it's not much different from his. So I know this is the reality. I think what the old man is doing there, holding his head in his hands, is what every Zimbabwean out there, with any brain at all, should be doing. We should all be hanging our heads in shame that here we are, 21st century, and millions of our own people still continue to live in abject poverty. There is nothing to to be proud of in living in such conditions. It's a shame that we have allowed ourselves to be so abused for all these years. It's now 44 years since our independence. And we are still stuck with a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical ZANU-PF dictatorship that has all but destroyed the country's economy and produced a political system that is in paralysis. Let's face it, as much as ZANU-PF itself is not able to solve the country's problem, the opposition is in no better position either. Chamisa, when he resigned in January, said ZANU-PF had infiltrated CCC. I think this was one of the few honest things that he ever said. Forget all that rubbish about I plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. He was just lying. He wanted to entice people to participate in those elections, knowing fully well that ZANU-PF was rigging the elections. And knowing fully well that by enticing people to participate, he will be giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. But he thought he could hang on to the few seats that he would win in that 2023 elections. When Sawangu started recalling his elected friends, right, center, and left, and he was totally helpless to stop it, that is when the penny dropped. He resigned from the party himself as the party president in a huff, claiming that ZANU-PF had infiltrated the party. It had. The truth of the matter is the opposition in Zimbabwe has been compromised so much so that even when they had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms during the GNU, they failed to implement even one. Mugabe bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and Nelson Chamisa, Tentai Biti, the whole lot during the GNU with the trappings of high office. They forgot about the reforms completely. Not even one token reform was implemented. And ever since the GNU debacle, they participated in flawed elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy. They were nothing more than Team B, ZANU-PF Team B, playing for ZANU-PF Team A to win and have legitimacy. He resigned in a huff. Of course he did. ZANU-PF has infiltrated CCC. Of course it has. We can pretend all we want, but the truth of the matter is ZANU-PF has captured all Zimbabwe's institutions: the police, the army, the judiciary, and now even the opposition. Chamisa, of course, may have resigned from CCC, but is already preparing to launch a new party. And he will participate in the 2028 elections without even one token reform implemented, claiming that he will win. And the usual wildebeest head, will believe him. They will participate. ZANU-PF will win. ZANU-PF will get legitimacy. And we are back to where we are today. Before I close, I would like to point one important issue here. I believe that the millions of ordinary Zimbabweans in the rural areas living in abject poverty. And what we are seeing in the photograph, this is poverty, all spelled in capital letters. Abject poverty. These people will transform their lives if they were to be given title deeds to even a piece of land the size of a football pitch on which their mud hut is built. If they were to have the confidence that they own this piece of land, is theirs, they will also have the confidence to build a decent house for themselves and their family. They will have the confidence to develop it, plant fruit trees, dig a well, build proper toilet facilities, because they know they've got their roots on that piece of land. This is not a new idea. This idea has been floated by the likes of the late John Robertson, an economist and a banker. He told Ian Smith that giving the blacks title deeds in the rural area will boost the economy, will boost their standard of living. Ian Smith did not want to give it. He was smart enough to know that it would do that. But he was also looking at political power. If the blacks were given the land, they will also have the confidence to exercise their economic power, and through it, political power. Ian Smith wanted the whites to be able to move the blacks as and when it suited the whites. It was part of the whites' control over the blacks. The irony is the War of Independence was fought for, among other things, for the sake of the land, to resolve this issue of the land. And Mugabe has made a big song and dance about it. And yet, when he started seizing the land for redistribution, as he claimed it, to the landless peasants, guess what? The landless person didn't get it. Yes, a few were resettled, but even those who were resettled, they never got title deeds. He sees most of the seized white farms were given to ZANU-PF loyalists. And most of them, by the way, they too did not get title deeds. They got an offer letter. And as we know, that offer letter could be easily be withdrawn. Somebody else will get an offer letter for the same piece of land, and you're out. John Robertson, soon after independence, according to him, he did approach Robert Mugabe and proposed the same thing he had proposed to Ian Smith. And Robert Mugabe rejected it for the same reason. He also wanted political control over the blacks. And that's why he denied them title deeds. What we are seeing in the picture here is a victim of a political ruling elite that have exploited the blacks, starting with the whites and now the black regime. After the last year's election, Mnangagwa flexed his muscle. Even some of the people who had been resettled, they were not given title deeds. All of a sudden, they were told that they were resettled wrongly. Whoever had given them the land did not have the right to do so. And hundreds, if not thousands, found themselves with their houses, whatever structure. Some of them had built decent structures, burned down, or they were forced to demolish it and start afresh. That is part and parcel of the political control. The most important thing that will please this old man is not the right to vote, it's the right to own the piece of land on which his heart is built. People can talk of the right to vote as the apex of the human rights, but to him, the right to own land is at the heart, is the most important thing in his life. I think as we fight for free, fair, and credible elections, when we translate that fight to the rural areas, it must be a fight to have title deeds. While ZANU-PF is denying these persons the right to own a piece of land the size of a football pitch, they've given title deeds to the super rich ruling elite. A few months ago, the country was shocked to hear that Bonam Gabe owned farms whose the size of the land of those farms was so big that one could feed the size of Lesotho or Belgium. One individual owns all that land, and yet we deny somebody who has got absolutely nothing the title deeds to own something, even just the size of a football pitch. That's how absurd this situation in Zimbabwe has become. I think we have got a serious problem here. As long as ZANU-PF is able to rig elections and stay in power, they will not want to relinquish their control over the rural voters. ZANU-PF still considers the rural areas a stronghold because this is where most of the voters have absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that is good for ZANU-PF because it means the party has control over them, absolute power over them. We need to end this madness. It is not right that anyone should find themselves living in the 21st century, living in such appalling conditions. That mud hut is not even fit for an animal. And yet, this is what somebody calls home. And they know that somebody else can easily come tomorrow and tell them that they must move. And they will have no choice but to move. That's how vulnerable they are. Yes. Some people may want to laugh at him and think that he's holding his hands, his head in his hands, thinking of the chicken in boxes. I think he's thinking of his miserable life. How he has found himself in this absurd situation where he is being exploited and kicked around like a football. And those who pretend to know better are themselves partners of SANU-PF. We did not need to participate in last year's elections. We already knew that those elections were being rigged. We already knew that participating only gives SANU-PF legitimacy. And Triple C, the few gravy train seats, whilst at the same time perpetuating the dictatorship and the suffering of ordinary people. And if we want to know what that suffering is, well, this is the picture. This is the embodiment of the consequences of a failed state. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.